So T1 Academy and Brian here have been cooking up some really crazy stuff in this draft. And this is LCK Challengers for reference here. So this is not the LCK main league. This is Academy. But there's been crazy picks here like new Smolder top into Kasante matchup, Katarina mid in this game, and even Soraka support into specific matchups. And although some of them sound absolutely insane, there is actually very sound logic towards all of these picks, and I really like both of these teams for experimenting here because I think this is something where I've noticed this year teams are a little bit more unhinged overall with their picks, and they really want to get as much advantage in draft as possible, getting as creative as possible. We've seen G2 go for the top lane version of TF top with Broken Blade and Tixante. We've seen some crazy stuff with like I believe some Hui support. There's been a lot of creative stuff going on, and I think it's really cool. So let's jump right in. So the draft doesn't start anything special here. Just note that there's a heavy emphasis on ADC bans from the side of Bro. And then T1 just basically deleted the mid pool. This is most likely the idea of how they want the shape of their draft to go off. They don't want to handshake any mid laners. They don't want to deal with these like shenanigans here with the easier matchups. So they want to open up the gates for Poby. So it does end up having to still be a Hui matchup. It doesn't create the impenetrable fortress like something like Azir does, but they're forcing into certain picks. And off the bat, Bro are basically telling you, like, hey guys, we are playing poke. And this could be the idea here that their idea of what's strong is in these champions here. Hui has been coming up more and more as a prominent pick. We've been seeing some Karma as well. She's getting a lot of priority, I believe, with Korean teams in particular because they're so minute with their advantages. So really strong start here. T1 on the other hand, they opened up with a standard Kalista opener. We've been seeing a lot. This is probably going to stop at some point because Kalista is getting nerfed next patch. So this is probably the end of the Kalista era. Maokai and Nautilus is going to be the opener as well. And it's fine to go Nautilus in this case instead of the typical Renata because you're already determined that it's going to be unplayable in terms of if you're going to play Renata into poke, it's not really a fun matchup to go for. So you need to get as much oomph and engage as possible, and this is the way to do it. Honestly, another decent pick that would fare well into these champions would be the Camille or some of these other like really high engage range or like even like crazy engaged top laners that could potentially go into. And I wanted to make a video on just discussing like the idea of just using other laners to go into support specifically, but I digress. We see the Ezreal Kilmar Bart lane as well as Hui. So it's very clear what both teams should be drafting for. It's just a matter of deleting the options for both of these teams. And that's where T1 jump into the Katarina pick on 5. And on the surface, you're like, holy shit. It's solo queue. Like we're going all out. Like, T1, these their scrims have not been going too hot. They gotta bust it all out. They gotta really go there at this point, right? So let's jump back a little bit. We got the Kasante on 4, which is very safe. There's not really, if I really think about it, there's not really too many top laners that you could pick that would be aggressive enough. I would say that Aatrox is fine, but it's not like anything insane. Do you know what I mean? Because there's so many poke tools on the side of Bro already. It's really hard to like have someone like Asante reach. I'd almost want you to pick something more aggressive in order to reach and really get that advantage, right? And the reason for that, it's like you could have maybe went Zac in this case, or like even something like the Olaf could be necessitated here. Just anything that really pops the Jets, because I think, as you can see here, they're probably just going to have issues with a lot of engage. Katarina does help a lot, and maybe they just are scared of playing something, they haven't practiced in such a forward requiring comp. And don't even get me started on Skarner, by the way. This has got to be a tech pick from Doiv. I don't know how to pronounce that, but like this is an evolution of the idea that, hey guys, we fully revealed that we know you're going to engage into us, so let's just do that. It's basically Poppy at home, if you want a analogy here, right? The whole purpose of this Skarner is to just cuck the enemy team from all their engages. The moment this Katarina is going to go in, she's probably going to be homeless, right? That is what Skarner is meant to do here. And honestly, In spite of T1's creative pick with the Katarina, creating a lot of space and going really forward, it's really hard to reach this back line of Bro because they already knew. They set up their entire draft just knowing that they're going to play backwards, right? T1 basically on 2-3 when they picked Nautilus, they revealed that, hey, you're not going to, we're not going to match poke. We're just going to try to kill you. So it's really easy for Bro to always draft more defensive picks afterwards so that T1 can't really do much about it. It's always better to pick tech picks that counter specific engage versus picking engage that counter specific range picks, if that makes sense. It's a kind of a game of chicken. Whoever reveals first is like kind of bites the dust, but it's really easy to attack defensive picks versus offensive picks. So that's why I find that this draft's a little bit hard for T1, as well as like they don't really have many places of contest, right? Kalista Nautilus sounds strong on paper, but with the Ezreal Karma poke, I think it's actually enough oomph to really negate them in lane. Poby's going to need time to scale. Like Dal, sure, it's like a soft winning matchup, but realistically, there's not much happening. So I would say T1 are on a timer. They had the right idea with identifying what they had in their comp, but they did not remove enough tools. So that's why this draft felt a little bit awkward. But again, I do commend them for being really creative with this. I think it's a very interesting draft. Game 2 is where this changes a little bit. So they ban Karma. That's the adaptation. No Azir ban. Bro get Azir. Okay? So now, Bro switches modes. We're in front to back mode. We got the Azir Renata unkillable fortress mode. So T1 are willing to handshake. They're like, all right, it's whatever. They still B1 Kalista because in their eyes, it's the best champ in the game. Right? Bro betrayed Varus Renata, and they're pretty happy with that, I would say. Right? The issue with this is I think this is where the kind of weaknesses of Kalista show. I think it just scales with your execution. And it's because, although she has a lot of commanding presence in laning phase and stuff, that's basically where it ends. And if your team isn't really able to translate that and really get a huge lead off of that, I think she's going to start to get outscaled to a lot of other champions. I really like this Soraka pick, however, because it does actually hard counter this Renata. The only problem is that you are shafted by the Kalista itself, the aforementioned Kalista. Because what happens in this lane now is that Rekkles can turbo stat check this Varus Renata lane because Soraka absolutely smashes this lane. But where does that advantage go? Into a Kalista that gets outscaled and can't really do much later on once they hit the phase of Kalista Renata. So I'm not sure if it was possible for Poby to do this, but I actually think the Azir on 1 would have been really ideal. And then they could have taken the ladder of the ADCs. They can give up Kalista Renata if they really wanted to, if their intent was to do a Soraka pick anyway. Do you see the logic here? I think when they switch their orders around, they give more flexibility here if they're trying to dig deeper into the Enchanter pool. And again, it just seems like an awkward draft. It's just like, you see T1's draft and you're like, all right, there's some champions there. They do things, right? They have some team fighting, but like you scale, but you get outscaled, right? Especially with the Smolder R5. And now it's like, well, shoot. We have okay lanes this time, but again, our comp is not cohesive. There's not like it just seems like we have the wrong priorities because when Bro takes these picks and then we pick our counters, you're like, wait, that's not very strong. And I think that's the main issue here with some of these T1 drafts. It's decent answers in some cases, but it's always close. It's the right idea, but not really enough, and maybe they're prioritizing the wrong things, and maybe these are just picks that are not fit to their team. And I really commend their creativity here. I want to reiterate that. And I really like the Smolder top as well. It's basically, just as an aside, it's basically like the TF top because you're a scaling ankle breaking pick. It's even like Vayne top, to be honest with you. You could pick Vayne in certain situations. She's just never picked in pro because there's too many champions that make her do nothing. So it's really only an R5 in specific scenarios. Even in this case, you cannot pick Vayne because Orianna would just space her. It'd be really hard to play, in my opinion. So there's that ramble. But you see what I mean here? I think it could very well be the gameplay for T1 as well, but I don't think they're really setting themselves up really well with these drafts. So